Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I'm Bart, and on this episode we are going to talk about a lot of the news that has surrounded U.S. soccer in the past month since we've last chatted. Talking about new competition formats, talking about new players committing to the U.S. national team, talking about some investigative reports done. But most importantly on this episode, we are talking about the March 2023 Concacaf Nations League roster that dropped earlier today. This is going to be an important set of games because the U.S. would like to qualify for the Concacaf Nations League finals in June, and we'll get to why that's important in a little bit. So to talk about this all with me, I have someone who is actually the most qualified person to do the U.S. Soccer sporting director job. It's U.S. keeper Thomas as the most qualified person for that job. How are you?
Good. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm still waiting for my call. I think they'll trickle through at some point, but my phone's ready for any call the U.S. wants to send my way for that.
Hey, at this point, we're all candidates, right?
Yeah, apparently so.
And also joining me is someone who was Berhalter out before all of this drama broke. It's Caleb Cook from USMNT Corner. Caleb, good to have you back here. How are you?
Man, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about some U.S. men's national team news that actually matters instead of just rehashing things from 30 years ago and mommy daddy issues and all that other jazz.
Yeah, certainly
Ready to
you
talk
haven't been
about some
dealing.
players.
Yeah, I know you certainly have been dealing with mommy daddy issues as a coach of a youth soccer team recently, right?
Oh Lord, it trickles into the high school ranks as well.
It certainly does. It certainly does. First, real quick, I just want to point out congrats to the 6 CONCACAF nations heading to the 2023 World Cup. You've got USA, Canada, Costa Rica, Panama, Haiti, and Jamaica. You may notice that none of those 6 teams are Mexico. So congratulations to the 6 teams from CONCACAF going. Still confused why Mexico is not. But before or after that, let's talk about actual U.S. soccer things. So the biggest news before this roster broke was that Alejandro Zendejas has chosen to be a U.S. men's national team player for the rest of his career. Thomas, this is big, right? Like this is a good thing that we just won a recruiting war, if you will, against Mexico for a very highly rated prospect.
Yeah, I think it's a nice move. He provides additional depth. He, in my opinion, he overtakes Arroyo and Morris at the position for sure, and it does kind of set the tone for other dual national Mexican players, and seeing how that we've lost a lot of those recently to Mexico, so it's good to kind of win one for that perspective. But he's a talent, and it's gonna be nice to see him in camp, and hopefully he gets an opportunity to get a start and show what he's able to do, because I like the depth that he provides.
Yeah, spoiler alert, he did make the Nations League roster that we'll talk about in a little bit. But Caleb, I think Thomas just brought up a good point of like, I don't know if he's going to be a starter in the grand scheme of like your best 11, right? But he's certainly better than Morris and Roldan, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. People were, getting really argumentative on Twitter for no reason about like everybody's getting excited. Stop being excited. He's not a starter. Like, who cares if he's a starter or not? Clearly he's a talented kid who just chose the U.S. men's national team, and he adds actual depth, talented depth.
Right.
Yeah, I think he makes our pool deeper. I think he's going to come in and he's going to push guys. They can't sit comfortably knowing they're in a starting position with him underneath him, because he's going to push them. And I like what we've seen from him. I think he's kind of a creative type winger. And I mean, my thing is, it's not a bad thing. So why are we trying to make it negative, peeps?
Right. I mean, I think this is just a positive overall. We got a dual national to commit. He's pretty talented, and we'll get to see him for the second window in a row now here in March. Next piece of news, or maybe it's no news. Obviously, we do not have a new head coach. We also don't have a new sporting director. Those searches are still ongoing. Obviously, it seems like one, the sporting director will have to be in place before the head coach is. And then two, we're just not quite sure what the I think budget is the right word for the coaching search and the kind of the limitations on that. But the question now is, do you think that Anthony Hudson can guide us successfully through these two matches and get us to the finals of the Concacaf Nations League in June?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can, just based on talent alone. I think that's really what's gonna get to US through these two matches and get the results they need to move forward. The talent alone. I mean, there's, I mean, the system's the same, pretty much, and I just think they're beatable teams no matter who's coaching the team, honestly.
Yeah, we've got Grenada away and then El Salvador at home. Caleb, we saw us draw El Salvador 1-1 last summer in a monsoon of sorts. You like our chances even with Anthony Hudson as the coach?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Thomas there. I think talent's going to win out. I mean, this is an extremely talented group. You know, first opportunity to show for the colors, for the stripes, stars and stripes rather, for a while. And I think the guys are going to come in, they're going to be ready. And yeah, I think, you throw whatever system you want. I just I don't see us tripping up, especially like let's talk about the difference between a World Cup qualification and lower stages of Concacaf Nations League. It's not bringing the same heat, right? It's going to be different games. We've seen some of these Concacaf nations in qualifying, and they play just, I mean, completely different than say a friendly or in a Gold Cup. Like it's just there's not as much riding on it. They're not
Yeah.
playing as hard. It's different. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's different, and I think we're gonna roll through. And I don't know if we're gonna learn a lot about Anthony Hudson, about who he is as a manager, about how he likes to play, because the opposition's just not there.
Yeah, and to reiterate, the sporting director, this is what US Soccer said, they want to hire the sporting director before they hire a head coach. We have not really made any headway on the sporting director hire. Peter Vermes said no. He just actually signed a contract with Sporting Kansas City through 2028. Ernst Tanner, who's the sporting director, Philadelphia Union, turned down an interview. The Nashville general manager, Mike Jacob, turned down an interview. But Caleb, the guy who apparently is still a candidate and still in contention is Gucci Onyewu. How do you feel about that?
Well, first I'd like to say, a lot of people turning things down. It's almost like the USSF is a dumpster fire at the moment that no one wants anything to do with. So that's great. But I mean, as far as Gooch, I don't have an issue with it. I think, Hercules Gomez, he shed some light on it and kind of had a different perspective. And I think it was an important perspective because, yeah, Gooch has kind of been in with a lot of the boys, right, quote unquote. But I don't think he's one of the boys. I think he's got a different perspective. He's he's not the most qualified, right? That's not shocking news to anybody. But my thing is, you see it all the time, the sports world and the professional world. People who don't have experience aren't necessarily the worst person for the job. If you don't have experience, it's because you don't have experience. The only way to get it is to get it, right? It's one of those weird things. We see it all the time, right? You graduate with a degree and you can't get a job because you don't have the experience. It's because you've been in school, right? I think he's young. He might be a bit more of what we're looking for, and we just don't know it. So I don't know. I'm not one of those that I'm fully against it. I'm also not one that says, yeah, let's do it just to do it. I think we got to hire some people, but that requires people to say yes to the interview in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's okay to be a little wary of hiring another former player. But I do think that Ernie Stewart was not the problem. And if anything, he was very beneficial to U.S. soccer during his time there. But Thomas, it does feel like this is a very precarious position to fill. It seems like the duties of the sporting director of U.S. soccer don't really align with the duties of what all these chief sporting officers that are turning down the interviews. It seems like what they're doing at the club level doesn't really match what you would be doing for the federation. I mean, can you kind of explain why you think that these guys are saying no? I mean, it certainly can't just be because the job itself is like a bad job, right?
No, I don't. I mean, the job's undefined. I mean, they said it. They're redefining the job, the position. Whether I need a GM. So to me, it's in flux. And so if I'm any of these individuals, again, they're all domestic right now that we're hearing about. I'm a little wary of what that is. I'm a little wary of what the expectation is. Going into a very critical World Cup for the country.
Yeah.
Exposure. There's more into it. I mean, obviously we want to finish well, but there's more into that. There's a growth and building of the whole process involved there, and I think that's a tough task for anyone to have. And I think whoever it is, unless there's someone that has is with great leader, along the way, I think they're going to have to surround themselves with strong people to help them through this and grow that. And that, I mean, even Ernie, could have done, that as well. I mean, he had certain experience, but that's what's going to make it successful. The coaches they put around them, the people they put around them to be able to do that for that success. So I don't think they're just ready for that. I think right now they're saying it's kind of like we're starting at scratch again.
Yeah.
Maybe if things were a little bit different after the World Cup, maybe some of those candidates say yes, but Vermees has turned down the U.S. Several times in the last 5 or 6 years for different positions. So he may know something that we don't. So,
well, I think to Kayla's point, it's not like this is a job that screams "come take me," right? Because I think it's very okay to say that the job of sporting director of a federation does not have as much direct involvement with soccer on a day-to-day basis. You are so far removed from actually dealing with soccer because, for one thing, the 2, maybe 3 direct reports you have, right, for whatever it's going to be, even their teams don't play every day. They don't play every weekend. It's like you've got men's and women's camps every month, but outside of that, they're not really doing a whole lot. You have youth camps every so often, but again, it's not like they're playing weekly. You're not doing the actual scouting, right? That's not your job. So you are doing a lot of politicking, of managing people who manage programs, right? Like if you're the chief officer of this side of the thing, I mean, you're very unlikely to be out there working with observing a training session necessarily. And that's what a lot of these guys like to do. I think that's kind of where the problem is, that this job is more administrative than what they're probably used to from their day-to-day soccer lives. And they like soccer. That's why they have that job. So this may be seen as like a not as soccer job for them. That's just how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's that's spot on too on that, because they want to be in. You're right. They want to be involved, and that's more the GM role. Where I think if that position existed, then maybe or exists or continues existing, then maybe that's more something in line to it directly associated with the men's national team, as opposed to the overarching
Right.
of all the teams underneath them. And so,
but even then, is that that GM role, which, as you and I, Thomas, have kind of talked about, it's kind of over the senior national team, but not really. It's mostly over those youth programs. Caleb, like, even then, it's certainly probably not going to pay as well as doing that at the club level, and it still might not be as hands-on and transformative as you would want to be, as you could be at the club level.
I think it's a combination or a little bit of everything, right? You've got this negative light that's shined on the USSF right now. You've got the removal from the day-to-day soccer. Like I'm a high school coach. I wouldn't want to be an AD because I want to coach. It's who I am. And Vermees might not want to step into a
Mhm.
position. Yeah, I'm just throwing his name out there, but there's all these different aspects to it. And then to Thomas's point with Vermees turning down so many things so often, maybe he knows something we don't know. Maybe it's worse than we realize, which is frankly extremely scary because I
Yeah.
feel like it's pretty bad.
Yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty with the program, um, especially on the men's side. The women's side too is, I think much more settled, but you're still looking at a future that is going to require you to adapt to a lot of teams that are doing soccer development better than we are. So it's a very unsettled job at this point. Something that is settled, however, we have two U.S. women's national team friendlies in April. They will be taking on Ireland in Austin on April 8th, and then again taking on Ireland on April 11th in St. Louis, the first U.S. soccer match ever in that new venue, which looks fantastic. 22,500 down there in the heart of St. Louis. Ireland is a World Cup team, so that at least is a positive. You're getting warmed up against a team that is going to the World Cup. But two friendlies for the U.S. in April. We obviously know that we have the Women's World Cup this summer, July through August. But then after that, we have a brand new women's competition that Concacaf has finally finalized. We knew about this, that it was coming, but they have given us a format. And it's pretty awesome. The Concacaf W Gold Cup. It will be a 12-team tournament. The final tournament is 12 teams. There's a lot of preliminary rounds to it, but it'll be from February 20th through March 10th in 2024. The big news is that this will be a FIFA window. Those dates may sound familiar because that's when kind of the She Believes Cup is. FIFA expanded the window so that this entire tournament will be inside of a FIFA window, meaning that clubs will have to release their players for it. That is a huge benefit for this tournament specifically because, not all of our players. We do have a couple who play in Europe. A lot of Canadian players play in Europe. Both the best players for Jamaica and Haiti are European based for their clubs. So that's a big win. But we have 12 teams, 4 from South America. That's cool. 8 from CONCACAF. The United States auto qualifies because we won last summer's CONCACAF Women's Championship. We'll have 3 groups of 4, quarterfinals, semifinal, and final. But the question is, like, why does this matter? And it comes down to the fact that this is a separate continental championship. This is not the women's championship that is also World Cup qualifying and Olympic qualifying. This is its own thing. It doesn't overlap with any other competitions. So I think that is a huge step forward, Caleb, for like just not just growing the women's game, but like making it seem like the big deal that it is. And if you're a U.S. women's fan, adding teams like Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, those are big names that now you get to come watch as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a big part of it. The 4 teams from South America is huge. Like you said, the big names. Marta is probably not going to be going a lot longer, but I mean, how long has she
We
been
don't know how
something?
long she'll go.
I mean, yeah, she might be. I mean, look, she can still play. She can still play. But you know what I mean? Like she's been a big name, a big draw for such a long time. So I think having those teams
Yeah.
is a big draw. And then, like you said, the fact that it's a standalone tournament, it's big for the growth of the game. And you know, the more competition, the more we can broadcast it, the more it's in people's faces, the better the growth is going to be. I mean, that's the only way. Like, that's how you create fans. Is people can watch it. They can sit in their living rooms. Kids can sit in their living rooms and they can watch it. That is how fans are developed. And if it's not on TV, if there's no competition, there's less of it, right? I mean, it's pretty simple. And I think I think it's great anytime they can play. I tune in. I don't care if it's a friendly. Like, yeah, I'm a soccer nerd. Like, we're all soccer nerds, right? If it's soccer, we're watching it. Um, so I'm pretty pumped about it. I'm pretty excited about it.
Now we don't have a host chosen yet. It wouldn't surprise me if it's in the U.S., but we'll learn about that later. One thing I do feel very confident about from looking at the graphic, we will probably have another insanely large cup trophy to give to the winners, and I think that's also very important, Thomas.
Well, of course it is. I mean, the standards there, and Caleb's right. I mean, this stuff needs to be ingested. It needs to be available. I mean, my daughter, she wants to watch women's sports. She wants to cheer them on, and every time I'm watching, she goes, "Well, what about the girls?" I say, "Well, they're not on." And so and so when they're on, I'll watch them. And I think you have to have the same standard. You have to have the same because their interest is there. And so you have to draw it when it's not a World Cup. You got to pull the fans in when it's
Yep.
not just a World Cup. And
Yep.
I think this is a good stepping stone to do that.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing, and obviously the next tournament that we are hosting will be Copa America. I mean, we have a massive opportunity for the U.S. to qualify for Copa America because we do not get a guaranteed spot. We are hosting it in 2024. This is coming with some changes to the Nations League format. So let me run through those. They are a little dense, but I'm not going to get into all of it. I'm just going to talk about the stuff that affects the United States. So basically, we're in a Concacaf Nations League season right now. That's what this roster that just got released is for. We have a final 2 group stage matches to qualify for the finals of this season, right? That's the best way. The championship of this season happens in June. We're trying to qualify for that. The 4 teams that qualify for that final will get automatic berths to the quarterfinals of next season. So next season, you will still have 12 teams in League A, plus the 4 teams that qualify for the final coming up in June. So that's a total of 16. The 12 teams that don't qualify for that final will be put into a group stage. They'll play some matches in September and October. And then November will be a 2-legged quarterfinal tie where the top 4 teams from that group stage will meet the 4 teams that qualified for this upcoming final. If you win the quarterfinal, you qualify for the Copa America 2024. So that's the path that the U.S. has, right? If you don't win that quarterfinal, you still get a play-in match to qualify for the Copa America. It is convoluted. That is the best that I can explain it. It is CONCACAF trying to get as many games and teams involved as possible, as has been their strategy since Montaniani took over. But Caleb, the important thing is this particular window matters a heck of a lot because if you qualify for the final of this season, you got a much easier path to get you to the Copa America next summer.
Right. I mean, and the Concacaf Nations League, it's important. I mean, every game you're going to try to win, but putting something a bit more for all these games, so there's more writing on it. I think it's just,
Yeah,
it's a good thing. And the Copa America, I mean, getting in there, playing the teams from South America. It's just, again, we talk about name recognition, right? For casual fans, when we're talking about broadcast, it's always how can we get casual fans in there? And when you start throwing in, Argentina's and Brazil's, and people's ears perk up because they hear those, they know those. They might not be able to tell you the names on the roster, but they know, oh, these are big. These are big teams. You know what I mean? And that's what we're trying to do. That we're trying to draw these guys in. And as far as the players go, competition and putting something more on the game just makes it better,
yeah,
makes it more meaningful. The minutes mean more. The running means more. Like just the actual physical exertion that these players are giving means more. You know what I mean? Like I'm breaking it down like really, really simple, but that's what it is. It is simple. Um, and it's all a good thing. I'm excited about it. Yeah, it's like you just went through a whole, you know, step by step of
There are multiple
it's
infographics on Twitter if
it's
you want to go look at that.
crazy.
That it is there are a lot of flowcharts. Let's put it
It's
that
crazy,
way.
but hey, you know what? It's a lot of soccer, and that is never a bad thing.
Yeah. Thomas, I think the biggest change and the most important change from the U.S. soccer standpoint is that, again, given that we qualify for the finals coming up in June, which we should, if we don't, we have bigger problems. But the biggest change is that we're not playing those group stage matches in November and September and October, right? Those will be open windows for us and presumably Mexico and Canada, probably Costa Rica as well. They'll be open for us to go play bigger competition, because I think it's fair to say that, I mean, El Salvador is a perfectly acceptable opponent. Like, they're not a bad team by any stretch, but as we've seen with both iterations, I mean, the U.S. playing Cuba in 2019, 2020, 2021, whatever it was, like, not fantastic competition. Playing Grenada, clearly not fantastic competition. So we are getting out of having to play those types of teams. And no disrespect to them. They're just like, it's hard. There's a clear, like, drop off after the teams that qualified for the Octagon last qualification. So the U.S. not having to play those teams, being open to play what's been reported like Germany, right? Possibly being able to go to Europe and play teams. That's a big win for the U.S. soccer team, the players, and the fans, right?
Yeah, it is absolutely. I mean, I'll echo what Caleb said first and say it's important to have these Nation League games mean something, to get to something else. Because to play them is just like, okay, well, we just did the iteration, then we do it again twice a cycle. It's you got to have a carrot.
It's hard because, like, I care about these games that we're playing in March because I want to care, because they matter for the June games. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, they do, and that's
But,
the
like,
thing.
it's hard to also be super excited to play Grenada. Like,
Well, right. I mean, and so essentially, when World Cup qualifying was, there's I think two cycles where there were 18 games. They played essentially the quality of a Grenada or Cuba. I think it was Barbados, one of them, and they killed them like 8-0. Like,
yeah.
It's not a competition. I mean, it's to build your stats for players, honestly. And so to have that ability now to skip that and to play some European teams or maybe some, Asian or African teams in Europe is important. We've got to have that opportunity to do that. We've got to get to the best opponents we can. And so that alone should be enough to motivate these players so they can have that opportunity and have camps over there and playing on the road and playing in different environments that is going to elevate them. Because we have to, I say we, the U.S. has to play the higher caliber teams when they have.
And it's not just the U.S. It's the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, three teams who will not have to go through the qualifying process for 2026. We'll still be involved in these Nations League things, but it's very clear that after this Nations League, like, qualification will take center stage, especially after Copa America next summer, and we won't be a part of that. So I think you've said this many times, like, we've got to find ways to play good teams. And so not being bogged down with these Concacaf minnows, for lack of a better term, allows us to go play. I mean, because even if it's just a friendly against Chile, that's a fantastically better opponent than Grenada. Even if it's a friendly against South Korea, that's a better opponent than Cuba or Barbados.
Yeah, and I anticipate that we'll see the U.S. have many matches against South American teams. I mean, they've done the last cycle. We saw pretty much them run through all of them, and any of those opponents are going to be helpful for them to play those. And I'm excited for that, because when this first Nation League first started, it was just like, okay, it's just I understand why it's valuable for the lower teams, but for the U.S. in Mexico, Costa Rica, Canada, it's not overly helpful for them. They need that, for them to grow and be more competitive on the national stage. They're going to need to play against those better quality, nations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited that there is something. I'm also excited we don't have to play the small teams and that we can come in at the quarterfinal. We get two games that really matter, and then hopefully that qualifies us for the finals, which will be in March of 2024. So March of 2024 could be really fun. You've got, the CONCACAF Women's Gold Cup. Hopefully we're in a final winning a trophy there. And then hopefully the men's team is in the final of the Nations League, winning a trophy there. That's fun. That's a good month of soccer, in my opinion. What has not been a great month of soccer, it's been a couple bad months, is the just overall cloud that has been over U.S. soccer since right before maybe right after the Wales game, involving Gio Reyna and his family. So if you've lived under a U.S. soccer Twitter rock, if you will, or any U.S. soccer news, essentially what happened was Greg Berhalter communicated in some way, shape, or form. We're not entirely sure the exact phrasing or framing, but communicated to Gio Reyna, a very young, talented player, that he would not play a significant role, these were Gio's words, in the World Cup that we just finished. Again, I don't think Gio was specifically quoting Greg from that. That was just how he relayed how he felt about it. And so in response, Gio was slacking off a lot in training, not putting forth a full effort, to the point where it was actually harming the team, because as we've all been a part of a practice, like, you have to go out and give your all in practice because you're trying to make your team better. And Gio being not doing that rattled a lot of people the wrong way. There are a lot of people whose feathers got out of place because he was not giving his all. Greg and his coaching staff apparently talked to him about it. It wasn't reported. I think this was also debunked, that the players basically helped him vote to see if he would stay or not. The point is that Gio had to face his teammates and his coaching staff apologize in one way, shape, or form. And from all reports after that, he picked himself back up, started playing a lot better, and as we all know, played a full half of soccer in a must-win knockout round game when we were down 2-0. So I think, if I'm going to editorialize and speak for all of us, I think we all agree that, like, the Gio problem at the World Cup, just the specific, hey, he wasn't trying too hard, was resolved. Am I speaking out of turn for you all?
No,
like, it seemed like that part was like, we're fine, we're moving on.
Yeah, I would agree. Teammate said it. I think Gio apologized.
However, what seems to have been a problem is that, and I don't blame Gio for communicating this to his parents, because, like, I would say this to my parents as well, told his mom and dad that, hey, I'm probably not going to get a lot of playing time. Problem is, his dad is a former captain of U.S. soccer, the U.S. men's national team. His mom, a former U.S. women's national team player, and two people who are very well connected to the Berhalters, as has been reported. They've been friends for almost 40 years now, Greg and Claudio. And it seems that Claudio, during the World Cup, was texting the general manager at the time, Brian McBride, was texting the sporting director, Ernie Stewart, not necessarily threatening them at this point, but making some sorts of threats about Greg, having information about Greg, about something that he had done, certainly expressing very much a lot of frustration to both of these gentlemen about his son not playing. And then after the World Cup had ended, Greg gives a speech at a leadership summit where he mentions the scenario from the World Cup about a player who wasn't really working all that hard and how they had to deal with it. And those words were somehow leaked, basically. I mean, I don't think he felt he was on the record at all, but they got out. And anyone with the soccer brain knew that he was talking about the Gio Reyna saga. And so after that happened, Gio's mom, Danielle, reportedly called Ernie Stewart and threatened to reveal some very incriminating, I think is the word that she was probably trying to do, information about Greg. And it turns out that Greg, had a physical altercation with his wife where he kicked her. And, certainly something that, though it happened 30 years ago, is a bad thing to have happened, and not something you want your coach to have. So all of this is a summary of the report that came out this past week. Alston and Bird, a law firm here in Atlanta, released their report. There's a lot to read through. I don't want to go through all of it, but that is the backstory. But I think the big takeaways are kind of threefold. One is that the investigation was first started to investigate the story of Greg physically assaulting his wife, then girlfriend, now wife. That resolution basically said that, yes, this happened. Greg wasn't hiding any details from the initial, reports that they got. And their conclusion is that there is no legal barriers basically to U.S. Soccer or anyone from hiring Greg Berhalter. So let's talk about that real quick. I mean, Caleb, the report or the statement that U.S. Soccer put out is Greg Berhalter remains a candidate to serve as head coach of the men's national team. Now, that does not mean he will be, but do you think it's fair that he is still now a candidate for this job?
I mean, I think regardless of whether he is or isn't, I think legally, if you say he's a candidate, you're trying to CYA. That way, if he's not hired or rehired, they can say, no, look, we said you were still a candidate. Everything, it's out there. We were, there's so much to it now. I think they had to come out and say that, right? Realistically, I don't think they're going to be going in that direction. I feel like if that was the case, this would have all been a bit more swiftly handled, I guess you could say. It's all, I mean, it's embarrassing for the federation. It's like the fact that we're talking about like you talked about it in the very beginning of the podcast, where I'm a youth coach, high school coach, dealing with parents. It's crazy. Dealing with a 10-year-old parent is one thing. Dealing with an 18-year-old parent is crazy. Dealing with an 18 or 19 or 20-year-old parent when your child is a professional is a completely different thing. It's insanity. And yet here we are. Like, this is our federation. This is what we're dealing with. This is our truth. This is our lives at the moment. As far as U.S. soccer fans, U.S. soccer officials, U.S. soccer players, U.S. soccer coaches, like, it's crazy that this is even happening. But no, I don't, I don't see any, I don't see how it's realistic that they think he will be, or that they're saying that he still is. I don't know how you can go about that after this.
I mean, I agree. I think it's a CYA, Thomas. Do you think this is more them just saying, like, yeah, like, obviously legally we have no reason to not consider him, but I mean, they kind of have to say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, but I will say, I mean, if this doesn't go down, I don't think Greg is replaced, honestly. Like,
yeah.
So I think, I mean, I don't know what was said behind the scenes, but like, I think that's another reason they have to almost say, look, he's a candidate, because maybe we kind of give him the impression that he was already probably going to be re-signed, because there was no indication otherwise along the way. And if
I'm going to pause you right there, because I think that is a very important distinction. It would have been pretty easy for U.S. Soccer to have, after the World Cup ended, say, hey, thank you, Greg. Your contract expires January or December 31st, and we'll be moving on after that. That would have been a perfectly acceptable thing for both U.S. Soccer and Greg Berhalter to probably have said. But we have this investigation. So to your point, it was like there was no indication that he would have been let go. He probably would have been rehired. I think that is a very fair assumption.
Yeah, and so then when everything comes up, then it's a different conversation. There's a light of that. I mean, and it's all tainted. The whole thing is tainted. I mean, and so whatever you think about Greg, whatever whoever you side with on the whole situation, it stinks for everyone. And I
Yes.
and so that's but I think you've got to take that out. You've got to be done with it. You've got to move on. You've got to essentially you can clear the table. Sporting director, GM, manager, you're gone.
Yeah.
We're gonna bring a whole new group in, and we're gonna start fresh. Which I think that in some respects you need to do anyway each cycle. I'm not sure you need to clean their deck for all the
No, I mean you wouldn't want to
positions.
get rid of your sporting director every cycle, but yeah.
Right, but I think there's something to be said for that in general. So
Yeah, I think all three of us were kind of on the like, yeah, thanks, Greg, but like it's time to move on type of thing. Like, yeah, I just genuinely don't like taking a coach into a second cycle. So I would have been perfectly fine with saying, thanks, Greg. We can remember you fondly, but we're moving on. Caleb, I think it's also important to again reiterate that Greg Berhalter is not at all under contract with U.S. Soccer. So Anthony Hudson's interim tag isn't because like Berhalter is suspended. Like his contract expired. It has not been picked up. So like I think that's another kind of one piece to consider is that he is not at all like legally bound to U.S. Soccer right now. But also as Thomas pointed out, like no sporting director, no GM. I agree with you that it kind of just feels like Greg shouldn't be rehired because there's almost too many good reasons to not hire him.
Exactly. I mean, he would have to be rehired.
Yeah,
and
not retained, rehired.
Exactly, rehired. And for all the reasons you just stated, I mean, we're not even talking about soccer, Yeah. There's no way. Now, I say this all the time. Now that we've said all this, sure enough, in a week from now, where there's going to be an announcement, Greg Berhalter rehired. But I don't see it. I really don't. I don't know who. Like, if you ask me to pull out a name right now, who do you think couldn't even like? I mean, it's already come out that a lot of the rumors, like, oh, this person Zidane turned us down, and then they're like, oh yeah, Zidane wasn't even asked, right? Like we hear all these contradictory reports, and like I don't even know what to believe anymore. I am ready to see some boys play on the field. Like I'm excited about that. Like we talked about earlier, I don't think we can judge Anthony Hudson's ability at all as far as coaching this team. But as far as who we want to realistically take over, I got nothing. I don't know. No idea.
Well, and this is where like I don't want to get too deep into the coaching question because there's plenty of time to talk about that, especially after we get a sporting director, which U.S. Soccer has been very clear, Thomas, that we're not hiring a head coach until we have hire a sporting director. But I think it's very valid to bring up the fact that like it's U.S. Soccer does not have the budget to pay for some of the coaches that guys are talking about. Like Jose Mourinho, as much as I actually think that might not be the worst idea, like I think that'd be kind of fun. He's not coming to U.S. Soccer. He's not taking a $10 to $12 million pay cut to come coach the U.S. men's national team. So, like, how much do you think that budget limits us, or do you think that's just kind of how it is in the international market?
Yeah, I mean, I think the international it's limiting in some respects. I mean, if you want that big bang of a coach, the name that's gonna if you get a name like Jose Mourinho, it changes the scope of it. It puts different light on it. You know what I mean? Like there's something to be said for that. Sometimes you can make more out of that financially by just having the name. Of course, he becomes the story, and the team is kind of secondary. And we start with Klinsmann. I mean, that's kind of how it is. And so, I think
Jose can coach though, so that's why.
Right. Well, they're right, but right, but you still get to deal with the ego issues and that sort of thing that come with with the name. And I think $5 million annually is reasonable amount, but I still don't think it's enough to bring in some of the because I think a small duration, and that's the thing. Like, and someone said it. I think maybe you even said it, Bart. Like, you look at if you said, hey, you're going to coach this team through Copa America and the World Cup for essentially 2 years of the cycle. You might have an opportunity where you could bring in a big name and do that. But, at this point, you still have a lot more cycle to go.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. You've got to be able to sell that a little bit because, the people that anyone of that caliber is going to want the juice. They're going to want that, and they're going to want, that attention.
Yeah.
And they're going to want that success. And
Jose Mourinho is not screwing around with Concacaf Nations League.
Well, that's the thing.
Sorry.
Right. And that's the thing. And I'm okay. And I'm actually okay with that. If they say this is our plan, and they even say, look, it's not going to happen right now, but Jose Mourinho is coming in, in March of, June of 2024. Okay.
Fantastic.
I'm fine with that. Go ahead with that. But, clearly state that so the fans can know, so we're not playing around with that. But that being said, I think Hudson has, he's got some opportunities. Just, there's some, what's it, Oman and Iran are,
Yeah, he's clearly being looked at. So
yeah. And so for him, I mean, this may be it too. I mean, if he gets those opportunities, why not? I mean, he wants to have that chance. And I think I think he's going to take it if you think it's the right move for him. So,
Caleb, I feel like U.S. Soccer, the job is both. It's not a top job, both from a playing standpoint and a money standpoint. But Greg making $1.8 million, he was in the top 10 of coach. I think top 10 of the coaches earning at the World Cup. That's not bad. But I think it's, to Thomas's point, you're not getting a top guy, but that doesn't mean you can't find a guy who has done well with the lower tier international squad and bring him into the fold. Is that kind of maybe where you think we're going, or what are you envisioning?
I mean, I think financially, like you said, we're limited. It is what it is. I mean, you look what Mexico did, hiring Tata, right? They went out and they gave him, what did they give him, like 4?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't making much more than Greg, like considerably anyway.
Right. But I mean, 4, they went out and they spent, and look what they got, right? They got a quick exit from the World Cup. Underperformed all through qualification, and we've talked about this, like, just because you've had success one place doesn't mean you're going to automatically bring it to another. We see it all the time in the club ranks. We've seen it internationally. You don't know that a person is the right person until they're the right person. And I'm so worried that they're going to overthink things, make a move, and it's not going to be the right way, the right move. I hope I'm wrong. That's just what I see. I think they're going to drag their feet. They're going to hire, the senior directors, the GM, and they're going to come up with something that they think makes so much sense, and I feel like it's going to be a train wreck. I'm kind of just sandbagging myself so I don't get my hopes up, I guess. I really don't know. The whole thing is so frustrating, but I do, like, to Thomas's point, like, we don't have qualification to worry about. So I guess dragging their feet this cycle really isn't that big of a deal if we really want to talk about it.
I mean, we're not getting a coach until the sporting director, and at that point, I think we'll have more clarity on what the vision is. But what we do know, I think, Thomas, is that, and I said this when I was on the Soccer Down Here morning show, is that these weren't patterns of behavior by Claudio. This just seemed to be how he acted toward U.S. Soccer, especially since Gio Reyna, his son, started doing things within the actual proper setup of U.S. Soccer. He has been relieved as the technical director at Austin. He's still an advisor of some sorts. But, I mean, we've all watched Claudio Reyna play. We remember how great he was at soccer. It kind of sucks that, like, one of the greats, we have a very short list of, like, great U.S. soccer players, and Claudio Reyna's on it. It kind of sucks that a guy of that stature has turned into, I mean, he called U.S. Soccer a clown show, and I think he was the one acting like the biggest clown.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand his frustration from a federation perspective and in his son's perspective, but that's you can't call them a clown. You're still an icon. So
you're
all
still
these,
involved with U.S. soccer to some extent.
well, right, and so and that's the thing. Like you look at the Trailblazers. Okay, you got Lawless, you got Balboa, you got Vermees, all these guys that started this thing, got it back on track, and then you have some success in the early to mid 2000s, and he's part of that. And so people look to him. I mean, honestly, he could have been a candidate for the sporting director. I mean, I jokingly sent a tweet out about that, but like, why not? Like, why not? And so, but now he's tainted the whole thing, and it's just got a bad taste for everyone when it comes to that, and it's frustrating because I just feel we're taking a step back, again. But the federation is going to live in the insanity that they've been living in for the last 60 years. They continue doing stupid things and getting stupid results, because getting to the round of 16 is great. That's not that needs to be better. We need to be better.
Not good enough.
Yeah, it's
That's
not
good enough for 2026.
Right. Going forward, you've got to be more. You got to have better goals. You got a better vision. You've got to get there. No excuses. There's no excuses this time. You don't have to win it as much as and I don't think they can at this point, unless they get a amazing draw and round. But you have to set that standard. Yeah. And they've got to reset. They've got an opportunity to reset. So they're going to be smart in how they do that. And I'm hoping they can kind of catch some, a candidate for their director, lightning in a bottle. Maybe Gooch is that, maybe he's not. Same with a coach. Maybe you find that lightning in a bottle, and and they set that standard. They get us back on track.
Yeah, I think the benefit of whoever gets hired as U.S. Soccer sporting director or U.S. Soccer the men's national team coach, it'll be someone who wants the job. For whatever reason, they'll be very motivated and want the job. It won't be just a paycheck for them. And so that gives me some hope. Gentlemen, we've talked a lot. Let's take a very quick break. We'll come back and talk about the March Nations League roster. All right, we're back and ready to talk about the Concacaf Nations League roster. Anthony Hudson, the interim U.S. men's national team coach, called up 24 guys for this window here in March. We played 2 games, one against Grenada on the 25th, one against El Salvador on the 28th. I think I got those dates right. If I didn't, sue me. Grenada's away, El Salvador at home, 24 guys. Just overall, Thomas, what were your first initial thoughts of this roster?
There are a few missing players, which actually I wasn't overly concerned about because some are injured. But I was excited. You have a good blend of your 12 or 13 World Cup players that were critical in that tournament, blended in with kind of some up and coming guys that we haven't seen in a little bit, like McKenzie and Reynolds and Trusty's first time there. I think it's exciting to have that blend, and I think it was a good call how they blended this roster, because that's what we need to see early on in cycles. We know what we know with a lot of these players.
Yes.
Put these blend these other guys in to see if they even fit, because they may not, and this is how we have to learn that. I mean, and so to me, I was pretty. I'm sure there's a player or two, but ultimately, I was pretty happy overall with the roster.
I mean, Caleb, this was a perfect roster, right? You only had one MLS player. What more could you want from a U.S. roster, right?
Well, if you go based on the U.S. men's national team Twitter, thermometer, it's absolute just perfection. There's a couple of MLS guys that I wouldn't mind seeing. I'm not. We talk about this all the time. I'm not one of those anti-MLS at all. I want our guys to be playing.
You're pro good players.
Exactly. I am pro good players. I don't care where you're playing. Are you good? Can you help us? Then that's what I want. But I mean, overall, it's hard not to be excited. I have, a list of snubs for sure, guys I'm sad about not seeing. There's obviously some injuries we'll talk about. But overall, I feel like it's hard to complain.
Yeah. Let's run through it real quick. The goalkeepers, Ethan Horvath, Zach Steffen making a reappearance, and Matt Turner. The 3 standard guys. I mean, Steffen coming back is a little bit of a surprise, but I don't think it's that. He hasn't been great, but there's not another guy out there who screams, call me up. And if Sean Johnson's your answer, to me, we're turning the page. Does that make sense?
Completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah. Thomas, I think the defender is also fairly straightforward. There's a couple that we'll talk about that could have been there, but Serginho Dest, Mark McKenzie coming in from Genk, Tim Ream, Brian Reynolds, the young right back from Westerlo in Belgium, Anthony Robinson, Miles Robinson coming back from an Achilles tear for Atlanta United, Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach, and then Austin Trusty from Birmingham City. So Trusty, McKenzie, Robinson, maybe not the top guys in the fullback and the center back depth chart, but it's nice to see them, I feel like, especially when Chris Richards probably not 100% fit. It seems to be why he wasn't left or why he wasn't here. But those three guys are curious.
Yeah, I mean, I said Trusty, he's been doing well, and I think he deserves to have, a look.
Yeah.
In general, I just think Miles Robinson's a little surprising, only because he is coming off the injury. I love Miles Robinson before the injury. It sounds like he's only going to play in one of the matches anyway, to keep his load.
Hudson
down.
Basically said they don't feel like he can play more than one match, which is fine by me as an Atlanta fan.
Yeah, so I like that move too. And McKenzie's been playing great. I mean, he deserves it as well. So and obviously we know how Ream's been playing, so he's definitely on there. But I mean, they're slim on their reserves. I would have maybe liked to see CCV on this, but other than
we'll
that,
talk about him in a little bit because I don't know if we know answers about that. But 8 defenders for a 24-man roster, I'm good. Midfielders, 6 of them: Brendan Aronson, Johnny Cardozo coming up from Internacional, Luca De La Torre, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, and coming back from January camp, Alan Senora, who is now playing for Juarez in Liga MX. The shock, I think, is that there's no Tyler Adams. He's obviously, as we learned today, injured, pulled his hamstring of some sort. But other than that, I mean, I feel like this is a fairly straightforward midfield group. I do think Sonora made a good enough impression in January camp to be called back. And I think that's a little bit Hudson making his own kind of like decisions, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm certainly glad Acosta's not on this list for
yeah, who could have been called up, but he's not. And then the forwards 7, Taylor Booth from Utrecht. I think that's the one that most people really wanted to see, who has been playing really well in the Netherlands. Daryl DK from West Brom in the English Championship, Ricardo Pepi from Groningen, Christian Pulisic from Chelsea, Gio Reyna from Borussia Dortmund, Tim Weah from Lille, and the new guy, Alejandro Zendejas, or as he's listed on this roster, Alex Zendejas from Club America. So Zendejas getting a call back as well. Look, I think the big thing here is there's no Josh Sargent. You're getting Pepe and DK. They've been hot recently. I also don't know if it matters, Caleb, that Josh Sargent isn't here.
I mean, you know me. I'm a big Josh Sargent guy. Definitely wanted to see him. I think the fact that he's just kind of recently, the last couple of weeks, come back fully healthy, he's probably played a lot into it. Because I mean, before the injury, he was hot. He was banging in goals, playing super, super well. I feel like he would probably have been, written in pen with how well he was playing. So you got to think that probably played a role in that.
But DK and Pepe, Thomas, like they've been hot. And Pepe, I think we all agree, was a very big snub from the World Cup team. I think, and obviously hindsight's 2020, but probably should have brought him. DK has been a guy who's always been on the periphery, and now he kind of gets his chance to shine. We have 2 strikers, 2 games. You got to think they're probably going to split time. So this is a good opportunity for both DK and Pepe.
It really is. I'm excited to see both of them. I mean, they both were, obviously not part of the World Cup roster, and again, it's that next phase of bringing these guys in. Even we know what Sargent provides, right? And I love Sargent, to be very clear. I think at the moment he's our number 1 striker in a must-win game. But DK and Pepe, I think they're both in good form right now and can Pepe's 20 years old. Like, let's not forget
I
that.
know.
Like, that's
Sargent's not much older, and it's not like
yeah. I mean,
DK's
so these
much
strikers,
that older either.
right? So sometimes with a young striker pool, you're going to have to take the hot hand and get these guys exposure. And I think I like the move by Hudson to bring these guys in. You only bring in two, so they're both going to get their opportunities to play. So
I mean, look, there's a lot of newer names. There's a lot of guys who I think people are very excited for. I am personally the most excited about Miles Robinson just because, again, as an Atlanta fan, it hurt me personally and physically to see him get hurt last year because I think he was a shoo-in to make the World Cup squad. I really do believe that. Obviously, I'm glad to just see him back. I hope he continues to improve. I still think, despite what USMNT Twitter thinks, he's a very good center back. I don't think he's a starter for me necessarily anymore because, again, Tim Ream is playing as like an insanely talented, like he's a god at this point now. You've also got a guy like Chris Richards, but for me, Miles Robinson was the one I was most excited. But Caleb, was there anyone else that you're like super excited that they're on this roster?
I mean, to talk about Miles for a second, I think you're right. Ream is playing out of his mind, and you definitely reward him for it. But if you're looking to the future, how long can he sustain it, right? And I think Richards and Robinson could be a nasty pair. And I tweeted it earlier. Miles Robinson's got 20 caps, 3 goals to his name as a defender, which is a better clip than Sergiño Dest. The guy's a weapon, and he's a shutdown defender. People want to give him crap simply because he is in MLS. If he was playing in any league in Europe, not a single bit of hate would come his way. The guy can play, period. So, yeah, I was devastated for him. Really good to see him back. To Thomas's point with Pepe, talking about the snub for the World Cup, that was probably the hardest one. So to get him back in the fold quick, soon, let him know you are part of the plans, I think is extremely important. And I don't care when it is, I'm always excited to watch Yunus Musa play. That kid he puts a smile on my face every time he takes the field. I love the way he plays, everything about his game, and I cannot wait to see him score a freaking goal.
I know. We need to get him one. Thomas, we talked about Taylor Booth. You mentioned that you're glad Acosta isn't here. Does that mean you're excited to see Johnny play? Because he's probably going to play that 6th position a lot.
I am. I mean, I think Johnny, he's been doing well down in Brazil. I think, if everything, if all the rumors are true, he was, very close, to making the World Cup, if another player had gotten injured or something along the way. So he was on the cusp, and he's 21 years old right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, this is his time. This is his opportunity to get in there. And I think we've seen him progress, with the national team over his most recent, matches. And I'm excited to see him on the team. And again, same with Booth, same with Zendejas. No Morse, no Areola. I mean, it's the next generation coming in there. And I think that's what excites me the most about this is I want to see some of these younger guys. And Zendejas is kind of a bridge type of player. He's going to be here. He's 25 years old. He's going to be here for this cycle and for sure. And, if he can continue producing, who knows for the next cycle, but you've got to bring in this 21-year-old Booth, he's been showing well. It's time to give that,
And it seems like we saw a lot of those retreads in January, which was, I think, for a lot of people disheartening because it is time to move on. And I don't mean like move on necessarily from them, but like a lot of the known quantities that we saw in January, and I'm talking Morris, Roldan, Acosta even, Areola. We know what they're going to give us. We didn't need to see them in a January camp to prove anything to us. I mean, good or bad, they weren't going to prove anything to me. So it's good to see actual new names on the roster. And even a guy like Johnny, who, like you said, I mean, we've seen him play before, but it's like, give him the opportunity and give him the minutes that you have had zero problem giving to a guy like Kelvin Acosta, who hasn't proven to be that much better. He just seems like he's better because he's a little bit more experienced. And Caleb, to bring back a point you made earlier, you can't have experience until you get that experience. So you have to give them that experience. And I think a lot of this is we don't know where some of these guys are. We do know that, Adams is hurt. Tillman seems to be hurt. Richards is probably not 100%, I think, is kind of what we've all landed on, is he's just not fully fit. But, there's no CCV on here. And he's not, to our knowledge, injured. Georgi Mihailovic, not here. I mean, are there anyone, Thomas, that you're like a little shocked? I mean, who's on your snub list? Let's just call them what they are. Who's on your snub list?
I'm gonna have to. I mean, barring injury, Richards is. I think Richards is the only one that directly comes to mind on that. Like, I just think he may not be in full form, and that's I guess kind of where you define the snub on that. But I'm not seeing a lot here. I'm not upset about the roster. In general, I just the CCV one is maybe the other one. You know what I mean? Like, other than that, like I'm very happy with what we saw here. I'm sure there's a reason for most of them, but I think it's it's kind of a split group from what we saw at the World Cup, and so yeah, I don't have one really. That's really angering me. CCV is probably the one that just stands out of this group.
Caleb, your snubs?
I mean, yeah, again, Chris Richards, probably some sort of health thing there. There's no reason to bring him in to risk further injury. He's just now getting healthy again. Just let him be at his club, continuing to carve out a role there. I'm assuming that's the issue there. But yeah, EPB, CCV, Georgi Mihailovic, Kevin Paredes, Jonathan Gomez. There's a lot of guys there. Josh Sargent, we talked about before.
Yeah.
A lot of guys I'd love to see. But to Thomas's point, we're nitpicking there because overall we've got a really good roster. If those guys are snubs, well, who are you taking out, right? I want to see Taylor Booth. I really, really do. I'm excited about this kid. He did have a little knock. He came out of the game last weekend or something. Obviously, it was minor, but that kid has been balling out of his mind. I want to see him. Zendejas, I'll take him all day over a retread. Johnny Cardoso and Alan Sonora, to me, are the ones where I'm like, okay, let's give them an opportunity. Every single time I've seen them, I don't get it. I'm not saying they're not talented, but when they're wearing the U.S. shirt, I've not been, wow.
Right.
I'd rather play based on what I have seen in a U.S. kit. I would rather see Kellen Acosta than Johnny Cardoso. And I'm not saying
absolutely. I'm with you there. I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm not saying Acosta's better than Cardoso because that's what people are that's what they want to hear. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying for the U.S., that is what I've seen with my eyes. Now, maybe he's been young, maybe he's been nervous, like you said, like I've said, can't get experience till you have it. Let him play. If this window, if he still doesn't look good against these, I don't want to say
Grenada's a bad team. They're a bad team.
Yes. There you go. Thank you. You said it.
Like El Salvador is a competitive team. Grenada is
exactly. Which is why I don't want to say cupcakes, but they're not the greatest teams we're playing. No. And if he still doesn't look the part, then I'm done because at this point he would have had.
He's had multiple opportunities. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, yeah, I would say plenty of opportunity to show what he can do. So I'm excited to watch him for that point. Show me what you can do, kid.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing for Johnny, for me personally, is that he plays a position where we need to find a backup because the backup can't just be Kellen Acosta again.
Right.
This is about raising that floor. Adams is our 6. Acosta has always been on the roster because he's the only guy who can, reliably play the backup 6. I've been told he's able to play more advanced attacking midfield positions. I have never seen him actually do that effectively. But, you've got to find that backup to Tyler Adams, and Johnny seems to be the only guy right now who's doing that. But there are others. I mean, we still haven't. Does U.S. Soccer know that Keaton Parks exists? Those are questions I have. But look, I think overall the starters are the starters, right? And no one who would play the 6 in this camp is replacing Tyler Adams as the starter. You know what I'm saying? So even with the center backs, I think one thing that I do look at is I don't think Richards or CCV are going to be affected that much, their position, by the center backs here.
Right.
The fullbacks are pretty much who I would have called up. I mean, Brian Reynolds, a little bit of a surprise, but Thomas, it's not like he has been improving a lot now that he's at a club that is kind of at his level, right? But you're still looking at Robinson and Dest as your starters, most likely. I mean, maybe Scally can overtake that. I would like to see Scally get a full 90 in one of these games, but I just don't think any of these guys are replacing the top end guys. So the question, I think, comes back to who are you most excited to just see how they can help the team, right? I think that's the goal here.
Well, I as much as I wouldn't say I'm a fan of Johnny. I just see this potential again. He's 21 years old, so he's still
I'm with you.
He's still there. So in term from an age perspective, and he does seem to be improving because we're thrown in there very young. But I actually don't think he's going to start. I actually think we're going to see probably Musa, Aronson, McKinney midfield. Honestly,
really? Okay,
that's what I'm thinking. Honestly,
I don't think the defensive midfielder matters against Grenada.
No, I don't think it does either.
But
the way they've been playing Musa during at the World Cup, he was playing a lot more. Back. He wasn't attacking as much. And again, mind you, it was the World Cup.
Torrey might get a look at the 6.
Well, exactly. So I think you might see more of those guys get that opportunity over than Cardoso, honestly, or Sonora for that matter. I think they're gonna. Those guys are very skilled, and I think it's important to see them, in that 6 role to see if they can actually, play it and produce. With the players around them, because if you put Aronson and McKinney there with either one of them, I think we'll have a good opportunity to see that. So, but that's my thought on that. Yeah. So, and I think that you have to do those little things too when you're having these opportunities, to get this group together. You've got to try different things out to see what works. The stakes, they're high, but they're not like you have some room for error where you can.
We only have the only result that matters is that we have to beat El Salvador. Literally, the Grenada match doesn't we could lose, we shouldn't. But if you go out there and you're like, you could play the U20 team in Grenada. It doesn't matter because that result doesn't matter at all as long as we beat El Salvador. So whatever. Real quick though, I do want to point out, we mentioned Paredes. I think we've mentioned you mentioned Gomez, Gaga, Slonina. They're most likely going to be in a U20 camp. So I do think people need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit on that. Now is not the time to put them in the senior national team camp when they have to prepare for a U20 World Cup in May. That is their focus, and that's fine. But we have Hudson who called up 24 players. I think some people wondered why there weren't more called up, but I don't know. I mean, you only get 23 on the matchday squad. You're talking about 2 matches. It seems very clear that Hudson is going to rotate a lot between both games. Caleb, do you think it's going to be straight up the 11s are switching, or who do you think is definitely not playing both games? Is Christian Pulisic playing 45 minutes total? Is Gio playing 30 minutes total? What do you think that squad rotation looks like?
Yeah, I don't see Pulisic going 180 minutes. There's no chance.
I barely see him going 90, to be quite honest.
There's no reason to do that. Get him a couple minutes here and there, and if you don't need him, there's no reason to push it. I'm in the mind of trying to see what these players can do. Like a Cardoso, you talk about Tyler Adams. Here's a great opportunity for someone to take the backup 6. And I honestly, look, don't get me wrong. I hope Cardoso succeeds. I want him to succeed. I just haven't seen it, and I'm skeptical. But I hope he gets 90 minutes to show what he can do. To your point, like I said, I think it's gonna be heavy rotation. There's no reason to run your stars into the ground. and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think they're very winnable games, even with the heavy rotation. Then again, we saw heavy rotation versus Panama, and it didn't go our way.
But again, the Panama match still meant something. Like this Grenada match, I'm telling you,
Exactly.
It literally doesn't mean anything. And
It's
Panama's
different. It's very different. Yeah. Yes.
Thomas, I mean, we talk about rotation. I don't want to speak for y'all, so I'll let you answer this. But like, the best 11 needs to play against that home El Salvador at home, right? Like that's where your best 11 is.
Well, for sure. I mean, I think for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, you have to win that game, and that's the critical game. But two, I mean, I think, I don't know. I'm sure the federation thinks about this a little bit. It's like, you do want to kind of feature your stars and you're at home too a little bit, So I think that there's something that goes to that. But I mean, I expect honestly, like, Aronson and McKinney to play, a lot of minutes, and Ream and Robinson, who are playing every week. I think those players can play. And so I think when you see Pulisic, I mean, maybe he either starts or comes off the bench, against Grenada, or doesn't play at all. I mean, because he just hasn't had the minutes, so you can't run him out there. I don't think, irresponsibly, in these games. But I think, I think the strikers. I think Pepe plays against El Salvador, and I think DK plays against Grenada. I mean, and I think maybe you mix it up a little bit in the midfield. I think guys are gonna get the play, because I think, are they still doing 5 subs? Is that still?
As far as I know,
I think that should still be the same. Yes.
Okay, and so that that benefits the U.S. because they've got so many players they can rotate in. If it was 3, it's a little, it's a little bit, a little bit more challenging.
If things are going very badly in Grenada, if things are going terribly in Grenada, which again, it still doesn't matter. Like, you can easily put 5 new guys in, and but like, El Salvador is the game that matters. I think we've all settled. I mean, they've got 5 points. We've got 4 points. Grenada has 1 point. Grenada will be finished with this after they play us. So even if they beat us and we're tied at 4 points, we should, in theory, be able to play El Salvador. And really, we just have to not lose. We can even tie El Salvador at this point. And as long as the goal differential from a Grenada loss isn't that bad, we're fine. I mean, we have a +5 goal differential. They have a +2 goal differential. So we have wiggle room. That's the whole point, right? The stakes are very low. So Thomas, I mean, like, if El Salvador is your first choice, who from that first choice squad are you saying, yeah, but I still need them to start at Grenada?
Yeah, I think McKinney starts both games. I think probably Aronson does.
Okay.
The Ream, the defenders, I'm not as concerned.
Robinson has to play 190 minutes or 80 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we can see, we know he can do that. Maybe would you give Detz the break? Because he hasn't played a lot. Scally, to me, Scally is moving up the charts. Because he's playing every week. I'm saying,
I'm with you.
You know what I mean? Like, I at some point you got to say, you got to get this guy in here consistently, either right or left, to figure it out. But like, he's moving up the charts, and now you're at the beginning of a cycle as opposed to the end of it. So your excuses are out the window with him. So I think I want to see more of him.
I think Scally has to start one of these games.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I just don't think Des is going to have the legs to do the full lift on that. And we've seen that anyway. In general with Des, he just doesn't have that.
Do you give Matt Turner both games, or do you even be like, hey Matt, you're starting El Salvador, but like we're giving Stefan or Horvath Grenada?
I think you do. I mean, I think you got to start, and that's me. I think you got to start the cycle.
I'm with you.
Yeah, because
you start your number one.
Right, you start your number one, you play your number one. Like, these games matter. Like, if it's a friendly, fine, you split it. I don't care. Like, but I think I want to see Turner continue. And I want to see what, because he still hasn't played a lot with this club. And so I still want to see more from him, because his improvement with his feet, as an example, was great in the little time he had in Arsenal. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of that, at that level, and see what because he is such a fascinating study of coming into the whole thing at an older age and just continue to work hard and actually showing improvement along the way. Because and so that's kind of why I want to see him. I mean, I'd be fine if they split him, but keepers can play, and I think he should.
Caleb, who's your probably the starter from the El Salvador game that you would still also start in that Grenada game?
Well, I think Thomas kind of talked about it. Like, there's a lot of guys you're going to want to get looks. And with 5 subs, there's an ability to change a lot.
Hmm.
So if you're strategic with it, I mean, you can get guys in like the Pulisic's and the McKinneys. You can get them in both games and get them minutes. Um, but yeah, defensively, I think if you're going to ride the Ream and then possibly, let's say Robinson, you're going to push that partnership for a while, then go ahead and get it going.
Yeah.
Um, you know, for me, the center back pairing is probably the most important partnership anywhere on the field. Um, a lot of times if you've got two, like a double pivot, it's an important partnership, but it's not as important as the center back pairing to me. I think if you could find two guys that just click and gel and play well together, you ride it. And if you set that tone versus Granada, or who cares? I don't care when the um, light bulb goes off. If two guys click,
Mm.
go for it. So Ream, both games, it's not going to hurt. Again, how much defending is he going to do versus Granada, anyways?
And again, you can take him out in Grenada like at 60 minutes.
Yeah,
You're like, look, we're up
the
2-0. Like,
5 subs makes it's
yeah.
so easy to make changes there. So I'm not looking for anybody that I need to go. I think with Granada, I wouldn't mind if you went full B choice or B team. To be completely honest with you, that won't bother me, and I don't think it's going to bother the guys as far as a continuity type thing, because I feel like it's going to be such a weird game, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain positions where you want some continuity. I kind of agree. I would rather just Matt Turner start both games just because why not? I think if you're looking at Ream, if that's your choice to start both games, I think that's fine. Have some solidarity on the back line. And probably Jedi starts both games. Maybe in the midfield, you have Musa or McKinney do both, but I don't think you need both of them going 190. I think there's just a lot that you could possibly do, but I do want that first game to be a chance where we get looks at guys. Like I want Johnny to start that game because I know he won't have to do a whole lot of defensive midfield work. So let him get in there and figure out his positioning with the rest of the guys. You know what I'm saying? Like that is a good learning lesson for him. Personally, I would start Scally because I think we're all in agreement. We kind of need to start seeing him. He is playing every week. And I know Serginho Dest is insanely talented. He is. But Scally's playing, and that means a lot. And he's not playing for a scrub team. He's playing for Borussia Mönchengladbach, a team with a very good history in the Bundesliga. So I do want to see Joe Scally. I'm not really that concerned about any other starters in that first game against Grenada, but let me see Scally. Any other thoughts about these two games before we get out of here? Caleb, what do you have to say?
I think you got to go in and set the tone early. I want to see goals. I want to see ideas and creativity, and just better overall play in the final third. Because I feel like that was something we just didn't see under Berhalter. It was like just a lack of ideas in the final third. You know what I mean? So that's something that if we see improvement there, I'm going to be really excited about. And, then I'll just make a t-shirt that says Hudson for coach or something. I don't know.
Thomas, anything you're looking forward to particularly from these two matches?
Yeah, I'll echo what Caleb said about goals. I think that's going to be important to see that, build that, start strong, set the tone. But also, Grenada's, they are what they are. But I want to see a good road performance. You know what I mean? I don't,
Yeah.
because that's the consistency. We have to see better. I don't care who the opponent is. We can't take it for granted.
Don't leave me waiting till the 60th minute for us to figure it out. I'm with you. We need to go out there and be like, yo, we're here to win.
Yeah. I want to see a significant 4-goal, 5-goal, victory on the road, because that's pretty rare. for the U.S. in general. It's pretty even in Concacaf against weak teams.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
because I go back to the Barbados example. The U.S. beat them 8-0 at home, and then it was the same window. They only won nothing. And
Yeah.
so I mean, obviously, I don't have context of who played in each game, but pretty sure it's the same roster. But that's significant. 1-0 to 8. That's
yeah.
I guess I don't know which one they
We got
played
5
first.
goals from 23 shots in the first game against Grenada, right?
Right.
Like, obviously, we expect a slight dip, but like, if we're not getting double-digit shots, 15 shots against Grenada, I think that's what we're talking about. It's like you need to be close to what you performed at home.
Well, that's the thing. And that's I think we have to start setting that expectation.
Mhm.
Draws or late victories on the road are not acceptable anymore. We need to, we have a better squad with most of these teams. We have to be able to, show that dominance, on the roads, so.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you for talking so long about all the stuff that we've missed from U.S. soccer in our little hiatus. We've all been busy trying to live lives outside of podcasting and soccer, but I'm glad we got to get back together. Thomas, you can follow him at US Keeper on Twitter. You can follow Caleb at USMNT Corner. Both guys who love to share their opinions on U.S. soccer and try to be as measured as possible. I will say they're not out there trying to make hot takes that aren't worth making. So I appreciate both of you all for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, you can subscribe to the show by subscribing to Soccer Down Here and get all the content that comes out there. You'll hear my voice weekly on Wednesdays during that morning show. And support the show at Soccer for Us Pod on Twitter and buymeacoffee.com/soccerforuspod if you feel like contributing. So again, thanks everyone for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.